Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Beitzah Lamed Hey. We begin right on top of the Amud, and actually we're continuing a discussion which we began yesterday, where we learned in the Mishnah that if one has some figs which were laid out to dry, so they're lying out there in the Muktzah area, that's where they dry. It's Erev Shabbos, he'd like to have some tomorrow on Shabbos. How do you avoid any Muktzah concerns? Since these things were set aside for drying, not really meant to be eaten as is, says the Mishnah, no problem, just designate them. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you get up and you say, Mikan, ani oichel lemocher, I'm going to draw from this tomorrow. And by doing so, he's reserving them, he's designating them for Shabbos use, and avoids any Muktzah concerns. And the Mishnah tells us that this only works on Shemitah, where it's not considered tevel. There's no chiyuv of ma'aser, but otherwise you can't partake in these figs on Shabbos because they're tevel, and you can't separate ma'aser on Shabbos. Now the question was, why are they tevel? We know that in order for something to be considered proper tevel, it has to undergo a two-phase process. Number one, nigmar malachtoi. The item itself has to be a finished product, a fully processed item. Number two, it has to be introduced into the domestic scene. It has to be regarded as meal material. It has to be roye pnei habayis. It has to be brought, it has to be delivered into the home as well. So two stages have to take place. Nigmar malachtoi, the item has to be a completed, finished product, fully processed. Number two, it needs to be delivered into the home or into the chutzner. Well, in this case, it's sitting out in the muktzah, where it's awaiting drying. It's not in the chutzner or on the bayis. Why would it be considered tevel, if not for the fact that it's Shemitah? The Gemara suggests that perhaps Shabbos could come along and give it importance. The karasel Shabbos oinig, food eaten on Shabbos has added importance and could compensate for a deficient material, for the fact that it's not even in one's home. It's considered kvius. It has a din of tevel. Well, then the Gemara says, hard to believe that Shabbos can have such a profound effect, even on something which is not yet a finished product. So then the Gemara says, you know what? I'll give you another reason why it's called tevel, because he regards it as something important. He declared, I'm going to have this tomorrow. With his dibur, by way of his expression, he was machshavit. He regarded it as something which is suitable for achila. That bumps it up, that upgrades it. We now regard it as meal material and would be considered tevel and asr b'achila. So that's where we left off yesterday. Continues the Gemara with a kasha. Who's speaking? Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, this doesn't fit. Says the Gemara on the top line. What do you mean? When the leftovers are put back, it doesn't have kvias. So Rashi will explain for us that although we know that when something is unfinished, it's not really tevel, you can snack from it. You can have an achilas arai. But midrabanan, you shouldn't have a permanent meal, achilas kva. Even though it's not yet a finished product, it's not yet tevel menator, it says to the Rabbanan to have an achilas kva, a permanent set meal from this material. Now let's say he takes a large amount, looks like a real serious meal, but he plans on putting back the leftovers. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when it's moisorei choizer, when the leftovers go back to the original pile, that's not called an achilas kva, because he didn't truly separate it. He didn't truly disconnect and establish this as a set meal. He's going to put back the leftovers, and therefore it doesn't have a din of kvius. V'shaminin in the Rabbi Yehuda, we know the Rabbi Yehuda holds the Amar. He said, whenever the leftovers are put back in the original place, it's not regarded as a separate meal. It does not have kvius. So how does that pertain to us? As Rashi will explain for us, over here it's a kolshkein. Think about it. He didn't even separate anything. He just said, Mikan ani oichel machar. Just by way of his expression, you want to give it importance? Well, he didn't even separate anything yet. It's sitting in its source. It's no better, and if anything, it's way worse than Rabbi Lezer's case where he took apart, he set it apart, but he plans on putting it back. Even that is not considered kvius because it's still going back. It's not an independent meal experience. Certainly in a case where he didn't separate anything at all, he just designates, he plans on taking. That can't make it kavua. That wouldn't make it a tevel. Second, the Mishnah say otherwise. In the name of Rabbi Lezer himself. It says Rashi on the top line. How could he even suggest? What gives it permanence? What gives it chashivas? Why do we regard the unfinished, unprocessed figs as meal experience, as meal material? Mishum diburuhu, because of his expression, because he gives it chashivas, he considers it an eichel. That wouldn't work. For even if he takes a large amount off of the tevel, and sets it before him, preparing for a meal. The looks like he's setting down for a large meal. If the circumstance allows putting back the leftovers, it's not considered kvius because it's not considered a separate entity. He didn't relabel his food. He's taking and he's going to put back whatever's left over. It's not considered a separate entity. It's not considered a kvius. And certainly in our case, as Rashi, certainly just speaking, verbalizing, expressing, that doesn't make it kvius. It's sitting in the muktzah with everything else. He plans on taking. Okay. That doesn't make it kvius. Where do we find this Rabbi Lezer's sheet? Says the Gemara on the second line. Listen to this Mishnah. Matan is the pile of olives awaiting pressing. So he'd like to take some olives to snack. He can do that. He can take one at a time, dip it in salt, eat it. It's called achilas harai. It's not chayiv in mas. Chayiv. But if it takes a large quantity, for instance 10, that's called kvius. It's regarded like a established set meal experience. It's no longer just a snack and is chayiv in mas. Well, it depends on the circumstance. Depends if you can put back the leftovers. If the pile of olives were toher, and we're speaking that this fellow was tummy, he's not going to put back leftovers. So by taking a large amount and setting it before him, he has established that as meal material, part of a comprehensive mealtime experience. And it has kvius, and you cannot eat it without separating the maaser. That's because he can't put back leftovers. However, minamat and tummy potter, if the pile of olives were tummy, in which case he wouldn't hesitate to put back leftovers, then it's just considered a temporary snack. There's no concerns. Because he's going to put back leftovers. But we asked the Kash on this Mishnah, what difference does it make if the pile of olives were toy or tummy? I'll explain to you. Reisha, v'matan tor. First halacha speaking where the matan was tor, v'gavra tummy. We're speaking of the person's tummy. So once he takes, he's not going to put back because he's going to be metame those olives. So he can't put back leftovers. So whatever he takes becomes separated, a separate entity, an established permanent meal, as opposed to a seifa is speaking b'matan tummy. The pile is tummy, the gavra tummy, and the person likewise is tummy. No problem. The motzi madale, in which case he can return leftovers. So it's only considered a temporary snack. Okay. So we see that in order to determine it to establish it as a kvius, you need to separate it without any plans of putting back leftovers. Okay, says the Gemara, well, then we could say in our Mishnah as well that we're speaking about such a case where he's not putting back leftovers. Masnisanami, but muktzah tor, we're speaking that the muktzah area which contains those figs is tor. V'gavra tummy, the person taking is tummy. In which case he can't put back leftovers. So it has kvius. But that's not going to fly over here. It's not going to work. Because over here, keep in mind, he never took anything yet. He declared his intentions. He plans on taking. But currently, it's still sitting with the rest of the figs. Now, think about it. If taking with the intention of returning does not make kviyus, then certainly if it's sitting there to begin with, it's still part of the rest of the supply. It doesn't have kviyus. Right? You didn't single anything out. You didn't separate. You didn't turn it into a separate entity. You didn't give it kviyus. It's still sitting together with the other figs. Just dibur itself wouldn't make kviyus. So why is there a tevel concern now, Mishnah? Ella Omar Simi Bar Ashi, you know what? Let's go back to yesterday's pshat. Shabbos is what gives it kviyus. Even though the figs are in the process of being dried, Shabbos has that profound effect. With Karasal Shabbos Oinig, it's considered an important achila, despite the fact that it's not even a finished product. We consider it important enough product that it's as though it's finished. It's considered meal material and is tevel. Rabbi Lezer Ka'amras, who are we speaking about? Rabbi Lezer? Oh, Rabbi Lezer Tamei. Rabbi Lezer is in line with his shita. The Amar Truma Kava. The Kolshkan Shabbos. Rabbi Lezer holds that Truma makes kviyas. So even if something is in the process of being completed, it's an unfinished product, but if he decides to separate Truma at that point, the fact that he regards it as such a chashav thing, look, it's a Truma candidate. The Truma process is being applied to this, that gives it chashivas and makes it tevel, in which case he can no longer partake from this product. So since we see that Truma has that profound effect, even if it's unfinished, lo nigmar malachtoi, v'koshken Shabbos, and certainly Shabbos, which is a set feature in the Bria, it's not his initiative, it's Hashem's Shabbos, that certainly gives this item chashivas, it gives it importance, it adds prominence, and it can affect even something which is an unfinished product. Oh, so that's the pshat now Mishnah. He wants to eat these figs on Shabbos, go ahead. If it's Shemitah, there's no tevel concerns there, but otherwise, you have a problem on your hands. Why? Not because of his declaration, that wouldn't work. Because Shabbos gives it kaviyas. And anything that's going to be eaten has the din of achilas kava, which is asur. This nan, where do we find Rabbi Lezer? He has parrots which are not yet fully processed, and he did truma on them. Rabbi Lezer, it's full-fledged tevel, you can't even snack from it. Truma gives it that importance. It's considered as though it's a finished product. It's considered as though it's kavua, it's meal material, it's full-fledged tevel. Don't eat until you take off truma, until you take off the masa. They say no problem. If you haven't changed its status, just because you apply the truma process doesn't change it, doesn't affect it at this point. Says Rashi on the first middle wide line. According to truma can affect even something which is an unfinished product. And certainly Shabbos will have the same effect. Because anything eaten on Shabbos is chash. And therefore it can affect these figs even though they're still drying. Rabbanon, this is Rabbi Lezer. But according to Rabbanon, we can say just as they disagree regarding truma. No, you can't upgrade something which is not yet a finished product. And same thing regarding Shabbos. Shabbos can't have that effect as well if it's an unfinished product. Really? The Rabbanon hold that Shabbos can't have that effect? Says the Gemara, Tashmami Seif. Let's go on to the second part of our Mishnah, with the Chacham expressing their opinion. Chacham Maimon. How do you designate, we're speaking about reserving these figs for Shabbos use in order to avoid muktzah? How do you go about doing that? Just merely declaring a general declaration, I'm using these tomorrow, that's not enough. You have to designate, you have to mark. Which ones? He has to mark and say, Mikan Vat Kan, from these figs to those figs. Okay, so you avoided muktzah. You can have them on Shabbos, but the Mishnah stresses that's because it's Shemitah. There's no Truma, Maser obligations. Tam or the Erev Shabbos is Shvius. That's only because the Erev Shabbos of the 7th year, the Lavar Yisuriu, there are no Maser obligations. Ha b'shar shnei shavua, the Bnei Yisur Ninu Asur. Apparently, if it's any other year other than Shemitah, you couldn't have these on Shabbos because they are a tevel. What do you mean? Why is it tevel? It's an unfinished product. Number one. Number two, he didn't bring it home to introduce it to the domestic scene, to give it to label it as meal material. He didn't do any of that. So why would it be a problem of tevel? Oh, my time and why? Lav mishum the Shabbos cover. Apparently because Shabbos compensates for all those deficiencies. The achila of Shabbos is choshev. We regard it as a finished product, meal material, and as tevel. Oh, even according to Rabbanon, Shabbos can do that. Is that true? Is that a raya? Says Malloy, not necessarily. And the Gemara is going to repeat the same steps that we had yesterday. No, perhaps the tevel status isn't a result of Shabbos. Shani Hassam. There it's different, because he declared his intention to use these. He gave chashivas. That's why we consider it tevel. That gives it kiviyus. That's why we regard it as meal material. Shani Hassam kimun de amar mekana noitel. Since he designated these things for achila tomorrow, that itself gives kviyas, gives chashivas, gives it importance, and it's considered like a finished product. But not Shabbos. Shabbos doesn't have the ability to do that. Well, if that's the reason why it's tevel, ma'iri Shabbos, then why even mention Shabbos? Afilu b'chol nami, the same thing will apply during the weekdays. His expression gives it chashivas. Why does the Mishnah mix Shabbos into the equation? To teach us a kula, a muktzah halacha. Kamash malon. By doing so, the Mishnah is telling us that even though going into Shabbos as a din of tevel, well, don't think that it's totally off limits. Let's say somebody goes ahead and does the hafrosha of trumas and masses on Shabbos. You're not supposed to do it, but let's say somebody does it. Can you have these fruit? Or do we say, well, since going into Shabbos, it was tevel, and going into Shabbos, you knew that you could not be matir this tevel on Shabbos. Perhaps it's out of bounds. It's muktzah. No. Says the Mishnah, b'di'evet it's not muktzah. Hakamashmon, by speaking about Shabbos, by referencing Shabbos in this halacha, what the Mishnah is telling you is that, yeah, lichatchila, you meant to make that designation, etc. But b'di'evet, there's no muktzah concerns. In fact, the Mishnah didn't speak about b'di'evet. It sounds like b'di'evet, it's not muktzah. Kamashmon, Mishnah is teaching us that tevel muchanu etzel Shabbos, tevel material is considered prepared for Shabbos use, to the extent of Shim Ovar V'Tiknim Mesukim. Somebody goes ahead and separates the Maser, Sinamutim Achila. We discussed this yesterday. Rashi had a reason because it only said the Rabban. Tais had another reason because technically Tevel material isn't really Aser. It's only because of the Truma of Maser mixed into it. That's Aser. Tevel itself is really, the rest of it is really Mutter. So, in combination with the fact that it's only said Rabban, it doesn't acquire Muktzah status permanently. But getting back to the shaila of why it's called tevel, why is it called a kaviyas? That's because he gives kaviyas. He considered it something which is fit for a meal. And that makes up for the fact that it's an unfinished product. He has relabeled it, considered it something important, something finished, something fit for achila, meal material, and it's considered tevel. But in any case, we say that according to Rabbi Lezer, Shabbos will positively affect even something which is loy nigmar malachte. V'ramini, listen to this kasha. We find elsewhere that Rabbi Lezer himself doesn't hold to that. This fellow was having some grapes off the cluster, so it's an unfinished product. Actually assumes that we're going to press the grapes. So it's loy nigmar malachte. He's picking up some grapes. And he enters from the Gina into the Chatzar, which is a Makom Kviyas. It's considered having entered the domestic scene. Right? As we mentioned earlier, ideally, the Chatzar and the Bayis can accept something which is nigmar malachta. That's considered phase 2 of the tevel making process. The item is finished. It's here in the home and the chatzor ready for use. But in this case, where it's an unfinished product, grapes on the way to being pressed, lo nigmar malachta, but it's in the chatzor. How strong is a chatzor? Can a chatzor affect even something which is an unfinished product or not? So Rabbi Eliezer and Bishul both hold yes, it will affect it. So again, he was having this cluster of grapes, picking off the grapes, and he's entering the chatzor. Rabbi Eliezer, you can continue eating, no problem. Why? Because despite the fact that he finds himself in a chatzor, who cares? The product is deficient. The product is not yet ready for meal. Rabbi Shua, you can't finish eating that cluster because the chatzor is so powerful and it creates a kvius, even regarding something which is loy nigmar malachtoi. Look, it's here, it's ready for consumption, it's in your domestic domain. That makes up even for lack of gemar malach. Likewise, when it comes to Shabbos, he's having some grapes off this cluster, and suddenly nighttime arrives. It's Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer Yigmar, continue eating, no problem. Shabbos doesn't affect it. Rabbi Shua Milaymo, you can't finish it because it has chashivas. It's considered achilas kva, and you can proceed without separating the maser. It's clear that according to Rabbi Eliezer, Shabbos will not affect something which is lenigmar malachtai. It contravenes the early conclusion that according to Rabbi Eliezer, Shabbos will have that effect, even when we're speaking about figs which were in the midst of the drying process. Says the Gemara, no, let's correct things. Both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua hold that a chatzor, something introduced into the chatzor, and likewise, food which is present on Shabbos, even though it's loy nigmar malachtoi, it now becomes upgraded, it becomes important, it's regarded as achilas kva, and is considered tevel. So what then is the machlekes? There's just a small nuance here, which is the point of machlekes. Rabbi Eliezer says you can finish the cluster, despite the fact that it's in a chatzor, despite the fact that Shabbos arrives. He didn't mean in the chatzor itself. He agrees that the chatzor itself makes kvias. Take it out of the chatzor. He agrees that Shabbos itself makes kvias. Wait till Matzah Shabbos. So the chatzor makes kvias if it's in the chatzor. Shabbos makes kvias if it's Shabbos, but not out of the chatzor, not after Shabbos. Whereas according to Rabbi Shua, once the chatzor has come into contact, so to speak, with these grapes, once these grapes experience Shabbos, they have now been upgraded permanently. That's the machlekes. So it's a side point, but in concept and principle, both agree that chatzor or Shabbos can apply the kviyus concept to something which is even an unfinished product. Hasam kediktani tama. The true pshat in that mission is as follows: Rabbi Nasan Eimer, loikish Amar Rabbi Eliezer Yigmar. You're mistaken. When Rabbi Eliezer says finish, he didn't mean b'chatzor yigmar, finish it in the chatzor. Of course not. The chatzor gives kviyus. Elo yoytze chutz the chatzor yigmar. He meant take it out of the chatzor and finish it there. So in the chatzor has kviyus, but outside it's not. V'loikish Amar Rabbi Eliezer Yigmar b'Shabbos Yigmar. And when it comes to Shabbos as well, when he said finish, he didn't mean on Shabbos, because Shabbos makes kviyus. Ela mamtin l'matzah Shabbos v'yigmar. Wait till Matzah Shabbos, not finish it. Why does it come to be sure? Once Shabbos arrives, once the chatzor arrives, it becomes kavua permanently. So bottom line is, we have Rabbi Eliezer, we have Rabbi Shua, who hold a chiddush that introducing a product into the chatzor, or introducing a product to Shabbos, upgrades it to a status of full tevel. It gives it chashivas. It is now being relabeled and regarded as meal material, and is considered full-fledged tevel, off limits completely. Even if it's lo nigmar malachta, even if it's an unfinished product, figs being dried, grapes about to be pressed, Shabbos has such chashivas, chatzor has such chashivas. We regard it as a finished product, ready for use. Continues the Gemara, but the actual halacha l'maisa is a bit different. We hold that all these elements, Shabbos, Chotzer, Truma, separating Truma, or Mekach, if the item is involved in transaction, that also gives the chashivas, but these things only affect something which is a fully processed product. Nigmar malachta. It's phase 2, not phase 1. It can't compensate for lack of production, for a deficient item. There's nothing to work with. So once you have a full item, that's phase 1. The item is complete. You want to make it chashiv. You want to label it. You want to designate it for mealtime use. You want to give it the status of tevel. Oh, now it's ready for use. You have to take care of the maser. These elements can come along and add that factor. The house, the chutzner, the fact that you separate truma from it, give it the chashivas. It's ready for use. The fact that you involved it in a transaction. Shabbos. So as phase 2, provided that it was already nigmar malachta. Kiyasa Ravin. Rabbi Yehuda. When Ravin came, he quoted Rabbi Yehuda as follows: Echad Shabbos. All these factors, whether Shabbos arriving, Echad Truma, or in a case where he decided to separate Truma from this product, Echad Chatzar, introducing it to the Chatzar, Echad Mekach, or having it involved in transaction. All these things give kviyas, but kulan and koivin ella bedavar shnigmar malachta. When it's fully processed, fully finished. If you add the additional element of Mekach, of Shabbos, of Chatzar, then it's considered tevel. But if it's loy nigmar malachta, you have nothing to work with. And it's not considered tevel, you could snack from it, you can have achilas haray. Let's go down the list. When he spoke about Shabbos, lafukim in the hill, as opposed to a hill who holds that Shabbos can upgrade something which is even unfinished. Tisanya ma'amr, the gersa ha'maver, peres makim la'makim, liktzer, some gersa liktzeis. He's delivering some fruit, some figs, transporting them to bring them to a drying area. And suddenly Shabbos arrives. Rabbi Yehuda, Hillel la'atzma yoser. Hillel has his own private opinion that Shabbos makes it tevel, gives it chashivas, considered something which is slated for mealtime use, even though it's on its way to being dried. Rabbi Yehuda, who paskined otherwise, is coming to oppose Hillel's shita. According to Chachamim, you need nigmar malachta, and then Shabbos can complete the process. Continues the Gemara. What about chatzar? When Rabbi Yehuda speaks about the chatzar only affecting something which is nigmar malachta, lafukim de Rabbi Yaakov, as opposed to Rabbi Yaakov, this nan amaver teinim v'chatzera liktzos. He delivered some figs into his chatzar for drying purposes, so it's loy nigmar malachta. Banav b'nei Beitzah echlem min haray uptur min ha'masik. His family can partake, snack from it without masa concerns, even though it's in his chatzar, because it's loy nigmar malachta. You don't have what to work with. V'tanya alone, we have a Beitzah on that Mishnah. Rabbi Yaakov Machayev. Rabbi Yisrael read a poiter. Rabbi Yaakov disagrees. He says that a chatzar has such a profound effect. It's been introduced into your domestic scene. It's ready for mealtime use. That overrides the fact that it's not nigmar malachta. So Rabbi Yechon was coming to oppose Rabbi Yaakov's shita. Chatzar only works as phase 2. When he spoke about truma only affecting something which is finished, lafuki, Rabbi Lazar, as opposed to Rabbi Lazar, holds otherwise. He holds that truma can affect something unfinished as well. This is not pei rishatarman ashla nigmar malachta. Oh, we had this Gemara before. If you took truma from something which is unfinished, Rabbi Lazar oiser lechem and haray. It says you can't even snack from it because it's considered full-fledged tevel. The fact that he took off truma, that gives the chashivas, and it's considered tevel. Chachamim atir, and they say truma can work when it's nigmar malachta. But when it's inherently deficient, truma can't do anything. And the fourth thing on the list was mekach, being involved in a transaction. Because it's not a lekech te'edim ha'maretz. This fellow purchased some figs from an unlearned fellow. In a location where most people go ahead and further process those figs. They press them, they dry them. So it's considered loy nigmar malachtoi. You can snack from these figs. Eventually, when he wants to do the maser, treat it as demai. Demai is a joint word. Damai, what is this? It's an unknown product. We don't know whether the Amoritz addressed the maser concerns or didn't. Most Amoritz would. So there's a special status of demai where you have to treat it in a certain way. Only some of Truma Maser, as discussed in Maseches demai. What do we see from here? That even though he purchased these figs, you can still snack from them. They're not called true tevel because it was loy nigmar malachte. Now the Gemara will make a point now. Shema min class. We actually learned 3 halachas from this Mishnah, from this Beitzah. 3 things. Number 1, Shema min mekach ena kivas. Ela bedava shnigmar malachte. As we said, that mekach transaction only affects something which is a finished product. So you have a finished product, and then it was involved in a mekach memka, a back and forth, and a trade and transaction. That gives it prominence. We regard it as important material. We treat it as something kavua, something slated for mealtime use, and you have to take off the truma master. But something which was not nigmar malachte, as the figs discussed in this Mishnah, in this Beitzah, mekach won't affect it. You can still snack from it. Shema mina, another thing that we learn, is that roiv amei oretz ma'asrin. Since we treat it as demai, which means it's only a chumrah, only some of the maser has to be addressed. It's only a suffix. Apparently it's because most Amoritz take their obligations seriously, so it's only a suffix, and it's even less than a suffix, because most roiv address it properly. Third thing we learn is Shema Mina. U'Shema Mina ma'asrin demai ma'amoritz va'afilu b'daba shlo nigmar malachte. Here's a chiddush. Perhaps you can say that since these figs were slated for drying, maybe we have to assume that the Amoritz wouldn't even bother separating any truma maser at this point. It's an unfinished product. So perhaps when this fellow finishes the processing, he should address it like full-fledged tevel, not just as demai, which has a suffix, whether it was addressed or not. No, the chiddush is that even in this case, there is sufficient room to believe that the Amoritz did address the truma maser obligation, and therefore you treat it as demai. So bottom line is, Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that the mekach process only applies, only affects, only enhances something which is nigmar malachte. And that's why in this Mishnah, when you purchase the te'enim which are slated for drying, you can still snack from them, despite the fact that they were involved in a mekach. Ula afukim with isnan, as opposed to the following Mishnah, where we find another shita, which shows that mekach has such a powerful effect, it can affect even something which is an unfinished product, with respect to truma maser, with respect to turning into tevel. This fellow switched some peris. So Reuven intends on eating his fruit, which he gets from Shimon, and likewise Shimon intends on eating his fruit, which he gets from Reuven. So it's basically a finished product. It's not slated for further processing. Or conversely, both Reuven and Shimon, who are switching these peris, intend on drying them, processing them further. Or one fellow intends on eating, the other fellow intends on processing. Chayiv, in all these cases, we say the mekach affects the product, is considered like a nigmar malachte, regarded as tevel, it's chayiv and maser. Because mekach comes into play, turns into something kvius, completed product, despite the fact that he intends on processing it further. Rabbi Yehuda lechal chayiv, the fellow intends on consuming his product, is chayiv and maser, because mekach makes the gemar malach. Mekach gives it kvius, because it's already something nigmar malachte. Lektzah is potter. However, the fellow who intends on still processing, drying his figs, he's potter because it's lo nigmar malachte. Rabbi Yehuda tells us that mekach only affects something which is a finished product, is in line with the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that only something which is nigmar malachte can be affected by transaction. So bottom line is, Rabbi Yehuda tells us that whether it's Shabbos, Truma, separation, bringing it into the Chatzar, being involved in a transaction, it only gives it kavias. It triggers the tevel status if it's a finished product. Hadron Lachamevi. Continues the Mishnah. Getting back to Yom Tov. Mashilin Peres derech aruba b'Yom Tov. So he has grain sitting on his rooftop. He sees rain arriving. He wants to salvage his grain. So you can drop Mashilin, you can drop down the Peres through the skylight to avoid the oncoming rain. This can be done b'Yom Tov. Avaloi b'Shabbos. On Shabbos you don't allow it. So this tircha, this process is allowed afkan Yom Tov to save his fruit. Umachas and Peres bekelim ne'adelef. Likewise, he has a drip in his roof. That's called a delef. He can go ahead and cover up the Peres using kelim, protect it from the drip. Same thing regarding when there's a drip on his barrels filled with wine or with oil, can cover the barrels to protect them. And on Shabbos, he can actually place a kli to collect that drip. Let's go over to Rashi off to the left. Mashil and Peres derech aruba. She has some wheat and barley lying out on his rooftop for drying. He sees a rainstorm approaching. Chacham allowed him to shove over the grain through the skylight and have it drop down. But there's not much effort involved. He's not actually lifting. He's just shoving it into the skylight and dropping it down. This only applies to a skylight, which is level to the ground. It doesn't require lifting. The it's sitting in the roof and it just needs to be dropped through it. But if there's some sort of window a little bit higher up, you have a rooftop protected by walls. Because there's a window in one of the walls. In this case, he has to actually pick up the product, lift it up, and shove it through the window. That's not allowed, but that involves tircha. Just dropping it down is okay, but actually lifting and handling it through the window, that wouldn't be allowed. He can cover the Peres with a kli. Well, what could be the hesitation? It's a tircha, not l'tzorech Yom Tov. We allow it. The Shari Rabban Mishum Hafsid Mama Chacham allowed it in order to salvage his property. Delef, he's protecting from a delef. Geshamim, Hayatnoitfim and Agag, rainwater dripping off the roof. V'chein kadeyai, Nami Machasin Delef. These barrels can be covered to protect them from the dripping ceiling. Tachas Adelef. On Shabbos, he can take a kli and place it under the drip. L'kabla Metoichai, Metinif Abayis, to protect the home from getting dirty. Continues the Gemara. We had the word mashilin mentioned at the beginning of the Mishnah, which means to drop down, to toss down. Apparently, there were no less than 5 versions of this word. Itma, we learned. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nassan. These two had different approaches, different versions of our Mishnah. Chadatani mashilin. One learned mashilin, v'chatani mashchilin. The other one had a version using the word mashchilin, but both were referring to the same concept of tossing, dropping down the items through the skylight. Amazutra, in fact, they're both correct. Mandatani mashilin amishtabished. The one who used the word mashilin is not making a mistake. Umandatani mashchilin amishtabished. The one that used the word mashchilin is also not incorrect. Mandatani mashilin amishtabished. The one that used mashilin makes sense. T'chsiv kiyishal teisecha. Your olive trees will shear their fruit. So we see mashilin is referring to shearing, to dropping, to throwing, to tossing. Umandatani mashchilin amishtabished. Likewise, the one that employed the word mashchilin also has a point. It means the same thing. Snan, hashachal v'akosel. These are mumin, blemishes inherent in a bechor animal. So we have a list of various blemishes which makes it unfit for carbon. We have a shachal v'akosel. What does this mean? Shachal means shnishmta yerechai. Its thigh got dislocated. So we see that shachal, mashchilin, is referring to dislocation, removal, disruption. Kosel means she'echad me'archaysev v'gvay mechaverta. One of his thighs are higher. It's unlevel with the other one. So in any case, we see that shachal is referring to dislocation, and mashchilin, now Mishnah, mashchilin Peres, referring to dropping down the Peres through the Arub. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak. We have 3 more versions of the Mishnah. Mandatory mashirin. Apparently there were 3 more versions. Instead of mashilin, as we have, some said mashirin, some said mashchirin, some said manshirin. all referring to the same thing, tossing, dropping down. And Rav Nachman Beitzah comes to justify all the different girses. Man the Tani Mashirin Lamishtabish, the one that used the word Mashirin is not making a mistake. Man the Tani Mashirin Lamishtabish, the one that used the word Mashirin is not making a mistake. Uman the Tani Mashirin Lamishtabish, and likewise Mashirin also makes sense. Man the Tani Mashirin Lamishtabish, the Snan of Shmuel Eimer, Nazir Lo Yachav, Roishi Badam, Nazir, who's meant to keep his hair intact, should not wash his hair using Adama, using earth. Should measure Sashayar, because the Adama can go ahead and shear his hair, so he's running the risk of shearing some hair. So we see Meishir is Lashon shear. Interesting. The Hebrew and the English are similar. So Mashirin is a Lashon of dropping, of shearing. Uman the Tani Mashirin Lamishtabish, the one that used the word Mashir in our Mishnah to indicate dropping down, is also something that makes sense. The Snan HaShchor V'Azug Shel Saporim. The shchor is a razor intended for shearing hair. V'Azug Shel Saporim, or a scissors used by a barber. So this is a Mishnah in Kalim regarding Kabbalah's Tumas. Even though these items, these tools came apart, they're still somewhat functionable, and therefore they're tamei. In any case, we see the lashon shchor referring to cutting, to shearing one's hair. Likewise, in our Mishnah, the word mashchir can indicate shearing, dropping down, tossing down the fruit. And finally, man the tani manshir lamishtavish, the one that used the word manshir to describe dropping down the fruit, is also something that makes sense. It's not mishin ashru kelev mayim, on Shabbos, if one's clothing dropped into water and got wet, he can continue walking, wearing them, without any concern that he might go ahead and squeeze it. So we see that nashru is a lashon of shearing, of falling. Inami or mahadasnan, as we find the following Mishnah, ezu leket, what's considered leket, which belongs to the aniyim, anoishe b'shas b'tzira, stalks that drop down while he's harvesting. So noishe, nashru, manshir, all referring to the same thing, dropping down, shearing. So in total we have 5 versions of our Mishnah: mashilin, mashchirin, mashchilin, mashirin, mashchirin, and manshirin, all referring to the same thing, dropping down, tossing down through that skylight. So now, let's go back to the Mishnah, which said mashilin peres derech haruba b'yamtiv, you can drop down through the skylight. Now, ad kama, how much are you allowed to do? What's considered reasonable within the realm of keeping the yamtiv spirit? Amar B'Zeir, Amar V'Asi, V'Amar L'Sam say Amar V'Asi, Amar B'Yechanan. Let's compare it to the following halacha that we learned in Masechus Shabbos. V'fanen arba v'chamish kubis shel teven v'shel tfuah. This fellow has a room filled with boxes, kupais, filled with boxes of teven, hay, or tfuah. And he's out of space. He has some guests arriving. He has talmidim coming to learn. You can clear up to 4 or 5 of these boxes. To allow for guests. To allow for learning. More compares it to our case. Apparently, up until 4 or 5 boxes is a reasonable amount, which is not considered excessive tircha on Shabbos or Yontif. 1 second, how do you compare? Perhaps there it's different. Because you have good reason to clear the area, to enable learning, to enable guests. But in our case, he's trying to salvage his property. He's trying to get his Paris out of the rain's way. Who says we allow him to do that much? Perhaps that's too much. It contravenes the spirit of Yom Tov. Inami, or another way to differentiate. You know why by Shabbos we allow him that much, 4 or 5 boxes? Since Shabbos is important in people's eyes, we're not concerned that it's going to lead to degrading the Shabbos. It's not going to bring about zilzal in the Shabbos, so we allow that much. Aval Yontiv to kill, but when it comes to Yontiv, which is relatively lenient in a person's eyes, which perhaps can lead to a person doing more things and being mezalzel and Yontiv, perhaps we don't allow this much. It's just too much. It's going to lead to zilzal. Or perhaps you can go the other way to differentiate between the 2 cases. You know why on Shabbos he has a limit of 4 or 5 boxes? The Lekef said mammon, because he's not losing his mammon, nothing's getting ruined. So that's it, keep to 4 or 5, no more. As opposed to Yom Tov, the Lekef said mammon, look, his parents are going to get ruined. he's going to have financial loss. Afilu tuvaname, perhaps he can allow even more than just the 4 or 5 boxes. Clear the entire roof. So the two things are unrelated. We don't necessarily have any conclusion from the Mishnah Shabbos as per our halach. Okay, so what did we learn today? Typically, for something to be considered tzevel and asur b'achila, the product has to undergo a two-phased process. First, on account of the item itself, finished product, fully produced. Number two, you need an additional element of kviyas. Give it chashivas. Earmark it for personal use. Indicate that it's slated for one's mealtime experience. Give it that meal material designation. How do you accomplish that? We have several options. Delivering it to one's home, or to one's chatzar. Having Shabbos arrive. Separating Truma Maser, that itself gives it chashivas. Or having it involved in a transaction. According to the Maskon of the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda tells us, all these elements are phase 2 elements, provided that the item is already nigmar malachtai. It's a fully finished processed item. Then, when we have the chatzar, the bayis, the truma, the mekach, etc., or even the Shabbos, it makes it kavua, and it's chayv and maser. Chacham allowed a person to salvage his property, to go ahead and drop his payers through the skyline on Yom Tov to avoid the oncoming rain. We had 5 versions of the first word in the Mishnah, and as far as the maximum allowance is that the entire supply was just 4 or 5 boxes. The Gemara figured let's compare it to Shabbos, which the Gemara disputed, and Beitzah Hashem will continue this discussion tomorrow. All the best to you and much hatzlach.